Bayside, everybody. Hey, I am fired up. I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad my iPhone switches by itself, so I showed up on time. Anybody else with me? So I'm Ray Johnston, one of the pastors. I want to invite you to reach in and grab out the message outline. Trust me, you're going to need it this morning. I'm going to come out swinging. We are in a series on the book of Acts, okay? While you're getting all set up, I have a quick announcement to make. A whole bunch of you, like hundreds of you in this room, have started coming to Bayside in the last 2 years. So if you've been here more than 5 years, would you raise your hand? More than 5 years. Awesome, okay? If you've been here less than 5, raise your hand. And if you started coming like in the last year or two, would you raise your hand? Be a whole bunch of you. We have a 7-minute meeting. How long? 7 minutes, right after service. We've got a 30-page book about how to connect here, how to become an instant insider. Easiest thing in the world. It's right through that door. Our staff's there. It's like meet the staff, get some great information, and that's right after the service. And no matter how boring it is, it's only 7 minutes long, okay? And now we're in a series on the book of Acts. Mark Clark was up last week and killed it, didn't he? It was phenomenal. However, there was one thing at the beginning Mark did when he showed the picture of Vancouver and how he was dragged out of Vancouver down to California. And he showed a couple of pictures, okay? And here was his picture of Vancouver, which is AI generated. And here was his picture of California. Well, that's why I say this. I've been to Vancouver, okay? That does not look like the picture he showed of Vancouver. Here is an accurate 360-day picture of Vancouver, Canada. And here is a far more picture of our state, Sacramento. So, other than that, he killed the message. Now, we are in Acts chapter 18. If you got a Bible, go there. If not, it's all on these notes. You can use that. And I'm going to start with an embarrassing story because it ties into this thing. Because Acts chapter 18, of any chapter in the entire Bible, Acts chapter 18 had the single biggest influence on my life. It changed the direction of my life. It changed what I've spent the last half of my life doing so far. And it all happened because I was afraid and wouldn't tell anybody, which it's embarrassing to tell you all the story, okay? Years ago, my wife and I were living in Chicago. I was a professor at two graduate schools at a university and then running 800 youth ministries for around the country. And we moved back to California. We didn't go home to Marin where we had a house. We moved to Folsom, okay? She was on parole. Sorry, hon. And so we moved to Folsom, and we were there about a year. We started a Bible study in our living room. Wham, it blew up, so it became a church. I did not want to be a pastor, so we called in a pastor and sent him off, okay? And then what happened is there were 2 copycat suicides of teenagers in Granite Bay. And people began to pray that God would raise up a church that would attract teenagers and the entire community. And they came to me and they said, would you start this church and be the pastor? And I said, no. You know that verse in the Bible says, Lord, here I am. Ask somebody else. I applied that verse. And they bugged us for like 6 months, okay? I mean, I got a fax. I actually have a fax at home. I have it in a file, a fax. Anybody, raise your hand if you know what a fax is. Wait, teenagers, look around. Raise your hand again if you know what a fax is. These people are old, okay? And I got a fax, and it literally said, to Ray Johnston from God. Regarding direct message from heaven. Below that it said, plant the stupid church. It's actually, I'm getting faxes from God, so they say. And the reason I did not want to do it, and this is embarrassing to tell you all, was I was afraid. I was afraid of everything. Anybody not do anything because you're afraid? I was afraid we'd try to start a church and nobody would come. I was afraid we'd try to start a church and people would come and I wouldn't like them. I was afraid we'd try to start a church, people would come, but no help would come. I was afraid we'd try to start a church, people would come, help would come, but then we'd have to buy land at Granite Bay and raise money in Granite Bay, and nobody likes it when a pastor raises money, and we might get picketed and sued, which of course would never happen. So I never had the guts to tell anybody, I'm not doing this because I'm afraid and I'm a coward and I'm wimping out. I just kept saying, the Lord hath not called his servant Ray to do this. But these people bugged us so much, I took the coward's way out. I said, okay, look, there's 4 stages to launching anything. I will take you through the first 2 stages, but then at stage 2, we will call a pastor. And I literally looked at him and said, under no circumstances will I be the pastor of this church. So we named it Bayside. It was Bayside or Baywatch. Went with Bayside, probably smart. And what happened is, we did a test service, and a bunch of people showed up. We did a test service a month later, and it doubled, okay? And I'm literally going, this is going to happen. After the second test service, I didn't even go home. I went straight to Chicago to a prayer summit of like 1,000 people from all around the world, all these 1,000 Christian leaders. And it's late night in this prayer meeting. And I'm sitting there with 1,000 other people. And anybody ever been in a prayer meeting? Anybody ever been in a long prayer meeting? Okay, yeah, it's like 11 o'clock at night, Chicago time. I've been praying for 2 hours with 1,000 other people, kind of lights low in this room, and I am prayed out. I'm making up stuff and praying for it at this point, okay? And I'm going, Lord, bless my children's, grandchildren's, pets. I'm to that point in prayer. And then I think, wait a second, I should pray for Bayside, that God would give it the right pastor. So I'm praying, I'm going, God, I'm really praying, I'm going, God, you know that this church is gonna happen. And the second service was yesterday, like somehow God didn't know this. And I'm going this, and then I said, and it needs the right pastor. And I'm literally, at this point, I'm going, and so fired up about this, I'm going, Lord, there's 1,000 pastors in here, light the person up, levitate them, I'll go talk to them. And as I'm praying that God would send Bayside the right pastor, for the first and only time in my life, God said to me, like, read Acts 18. I'm like, I take out my Bible, I open it up to Acts chapter 18. I look down and it says these words in red letters. And the Lord said to Paul in the night, which this was, by a vision, which this feels like. And the next phrase is this: do not be afraid. My first thought is, oh no, I do not want to do this. Okay, I'm going to keep reading. There's got to be a loophole. And now what you don't know is this. My wife and I had already planned. We kept our home in Marin, renting in Folsom, heading back to Marin until I read the next irritating verse, which says, Paul stayed where he was and taught the word of God. I go, yeah, you're clapping. I wasn't. I went, oh no. So I get up out of the chair at the prayer meeting. I go up. Do we have any married men here? Just married guys, where are you? Okay. I went up to the hotel room. I'm like crying. I call my wife to find out if I've heard from God or not. And I tell her this thing. She starts crying on the phone. Carol had already started a Bible study up here of women. The wife of the coach of the Kings at that time was coming. All this great stuff happening. And she starts crying. And she goes, I knew God was telling us to do this. I just am praying for you that God would make it real obvious, because you're a guy. And how many of you wives know exactly what she was talking about? I have never done anything in my life like this. I literally went, Acts 18 changed the direction of my life. And the last 30 years so far, which feels like it's still year one, the last 30 years have been by far my favorite 30 years of all time. By far, I have seen God do more stuff, blow more stuff internationally, nationally, church plant, all over the place. My own kids, our own family, our own relatives have been back there. I have seen, and the reason I'm telling that story is this. We're going to go into Acts 18, because I want to say to you, I almost missed the best thing God was ever going to do in me and for me and through me. Almost missed the best thing God ever did in my life for one reason: fear. Fear is the ultimate limiter on your life. Not only will it make you miserable, make you sleepless, make you stressed out, but it will stop the best things that God has for you in your future. And this passage, and I'm going to come out swinging. Take notes, get your phone out, take pictures of the slides, whatever it takes, because the key to overcoming fear is not to go, I'm going to stop stressing out, because it doesn't work. Then you get worried about being worried. The key to this is this. Paul says this in this chapter, verse 23. After spending some time in Antioch, Paul set out from there and traveled from the place throughout the region of Galatia and Phrygia. And it says this: whenever Paul went somewhere, here's what it says. He said, he's strengthening all the disciples. He's strengthening all the disciples. And I love this, because here's the deal. The antidote to fear, the way to stop stress, the antidote to fear is this. Here it is: get stronger. The antidote to fear is to get spiritually stronger, okay? And in this passage, Paul gives 5 steps to strengthening yourself. Ways God strengthens you so that you will get stronger. Fear will limit, and you will sleep better, and you will have a way better future. Now, to understand this, you got to start with verse 1, and here it is, okay? It starts this, Acts chapter 18, verse 1. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. Well, if you've got your notes out there, okay, you look at the front page here, it'll go up on the screen. What's Corinth like? Athens was the intellectual center. What's Corinth like? And it's got marks by these characteristics. Here we go. Number 1, it was attractive. It was the geographical center of Greece. It was on the coast. It was gorgeous. It was the hot place to live. Everybody. Second is this: it was affluent, okay? And it was very affluent. It was the business center of Greece, and it was a wealthy place to do business. You got the Mediterranean Sea on one side, the Aegean Sea on the other side of this thing, and it's just the place to be if you're a business person or you're an executive. Okay, third is this. It was heavily populated. That led to a population explosion. One guy put it this on the screen: Corinth was a wide open boom town. San Francisco in the days of the gold rush is perhaps the most illuminating. By the way, if you're going, what's Corinth like? Athens is like, we sit around and debate and listen to Socrates, okay, or Socrates. What's Corinth like? It's loud, it's wealthy, it's rich, it's influential, it's heavily populated, it's absolutely wild. It was a place that, it was also sex-crazed, sexually saturated area. They had matter of fact, they had all ancient cities there. Corinth had an Acropolis, a high city. We're just going to show you a picture, and you'll see this, okay? That is the mountain behind Corinth, okay? This is ancient Corinth around here. I've been there a bunch of times, taking tours. I love taking people there, because you see that mountain back there? Everybody see that? Then you see what's on top, see the ancient ruins up there? That was the ancient temple of Aphrodite. And it was pretty crazy, okay? Because they had 1,000 temple prostitutes up there, and they would go up there, and it was a fertility god, right? And it was to make your land fertile. And you would go up there, and you have sex with one of these prostitutes during frenzied worship. And then at night, they would come down into town, walk the streets, kind of get sex with people, okay? I mean, this stuff, I've talked to guys that are going, it's so hard to walk with God in the days of the internet. From my knowledge, Granite Bay doesn't have 1,000 prostitutes from Tahoe coming down here plying the trade, okay? I mean, this place, it was absolutely crazy. And one writer actually said this: Corinth was a seaman's paradise, a drunkard's heaven, and a virtuous woman's hell. And when they called somebody a Corinthian girl, that meant she was a prostitute. It was also an athletic center. They had a stadium built there. Now, can you think of any state in America that is described by being attractive, coastal, influential, affluent, heavily populated, sex-crazed, and it's an entertainment center? Welcome to California. And so Paul writes this incredible letter, and in this letter, which changed my life, chapter 18, it's about fear. And I want to give you 5, write these down, take pictures if you don't have notes. Paul gave 5 ways God strengthens us to stop us from being ruled by anxiety and fear. And the first one is this: believe there are no circumstances that God can't use. First one is this: believe there are no circumstances that God won't use. Why? Because that will give you hope. I love this. I'm going to put these, you're going to see 5 of these. It's going to be 5 screens without a. Number 1, we get weak and anemic when we think our circumstances are random and out of control. And we get stronger when we realize that God is in control. And now let's get into the past. Here we go. Verse 2. When Paul goes to Corinth, there he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla. Okay? And so you got this guy, Aquila and Priscilla, and they are a husband-wife team, which is awesome. Carolina, same thing. A lot of you guys are like that. They're a husband and wife ministry team. And you're going, how did Paul meet them? Why did they meet the Apostle Paul and have their life changed? Here's the reason why, okay? Because Claudius had ordered all Jews to revolve. They're there for one reason. They got kicked out of their home. They got kicked out of Rome. So really bad things happens, God uses it. And then, keep going the verses, when Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. But when they opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, your blood be upon your own heads. I'm innocent of this. From now on, I'm going to the Gentiles and use that to change the whole world. So you got Priscilla, Aquila, and Paul. Here's their circumstances, okay? Number 1, Paul has been kicked out of 5 straight cities. That's how he got to Corinth. Second is Aquila and Priscilla were forced to move out of Rome. And Paul then is thrown out of the synagogue. 3 things that look like bad things, what God was working, when it didn't look like God was working. So here, I want to give you 3 lessons. Write them down if you got it, okay? Number 1 is this: God is always working, and sometimes working best when it doesn't look like God is working at all. God is working best, cover to cover. The Bible paints the same picture. Joseph, Moses, Abraham, Nehemiah, Mary, Paul, Aquila, Priscilla, they all have one thing in common. The best things that God ever did in their life started with a problem. Raise your hand if you currently have any problems. Raise your hand if they're sitting next to you. No, don't raise your hand. The best thing that God did with somebody's life always started with a problem. Second principle out of this is this: every single miracle in the Bible started with a problem. Every one. Number 3 is this: character and anything good is only developed in the valleys of life. No great character qualities are ever developed in the mountaintops of life. Character, the 2 things that are big deals, character and compassion, are never developed in the mountains. Character and compassion are developed in the valleys of life. And if you're going, where do you get strength for this kind of thing? Here's where you get it. I'm going to put up a great quote. And for every fear that we have, there is a corresponding attribute of God. Something about his character, something about his nature that corresponds to each and every fear. All of our fears come from not understanding or trusting aspects of God's character. If we want to get over our fears, the secret is get to know God, because when we understand what God is like, we discover that we don't have anything to be afraid of. Since this is embarrassing story day, one of the reasons we're here was I was massively rejected. Carol and I moved from Marin. I was in Marin for 6.5 years. I was a youth pastor at this great church in Marin County, had a blast, loved everything, best friends there, all of this kind of stuff. We then moved from Marin to Chicago. Do not do this. And I'm a professor there at 2 different graduate schools and a university, running 800 youth ministries, all this kind of stuff. And so we moved there. And then 3.5 later, we moved back, but we don't go back to Marin. We kind of temporarily move to Folsom. Anybody here live in Folsom? Yeah, Carol's on parole, so we moved to Folsom. It was very handy. And kidding, hon. And so we moved there, and then after being about 6 years, we're in a rented home, a real home's back in Marin. The church, somebody calls me from the church, and they said, "Hey, our pastor just resigned. Would you be interested in being our pastor?" And I said, well, I'm sure willing to pray about it, so send me some stuff. So they sent me some stuff, wrote some stuff, sent it back. And I was, to be really honest with you, I was feeling like, this is so cool. God is so smart. Our home's right there. Everything's right there. This is going to be awesome. These people all love me. I love them. They're still all of our best friends are still there. Our home's like a mile from the church. This is perfect. God, you are amazing. You knew what you're doing all along. Well, so I sent this back, and I don't hear anything for 6 months. And then I get this like letter. And it wasn't even Dear Ray, it was like, occupant in Christ letter. And it said, Dear Pastor, and I've used my name. Thank you for applying for the job at this church, which I didn't do, they called me. And I read the next paragraph says, but we don't think you're the right guy, you're an idiot, we're hiring somebody else. Basically, is kind of what it said. And I felt rejected by people I knew, all this stuff. Now, I found out years later, they had a board at this church, and the board was the search committee, and one person, they had this rule where it's like, if we're not unanimous, which is minority rule, it's a bad idea. And then this person called me like a couple years later, and I had no clue, and he said, hey, I wanted you to know what really happened. He goes, there was just one, we were all like, let's get him, and we're one person. It was like, nope, I don't think he's the guy. He's just a youth pastor. I don't think he can be pastor at church. And so, but I felt so rejected. If I get discouraged, I tend to bounce back pretty quick. I didn't bounce back very quick. And it took a while because I was really bummed out. Felt rejected, all that stuff, okay? It was the single best thing that ever happened to me. It's in that category because if I went there, none of this exists. And my last 30 years don't get to exist here. And sometimes God is working when you've been rejected. God is working when things are tough. It isn't that God's mad at you. It is not that God's trying to wreck your life. It is God is working when it doesn't look like God is at work. Did anybody need to hear that? Okay, that's number one. Okay, I got 4 more, so let's pick up the pace. Number 2 is this. Quit stressing out because somebody doesn't like you. Quit stressing out because you can't please them. Quit stressing out because of your critics. That will give you a better focus. Why is that a big deal? It's going to go on the screen again. Here we go. We get weak and anemic when we let criticism cause us to do what? Give up, okay? However, we get stronger when we refuse to quit. That's the verse, and we already read this verse. When Silas and Timothy came from, Paul devoted himself to preaching, testifying to Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. And it says this, they opposed Paul and became abusive, okay? And notice this, Paul's response to that, go down to verse 7. Does he quit? No. Paul left the synagogue, went next door to the house of Titus Justus, a worshiper of God, Crispus, the synagogue leader who threw him out, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and they heard Paul, believed, and were baptized. In other words, the results of this were amazing. Now, I'm not saying all criticism is bad. Look up here. All criticism isn't bad because sometimes you can listen to it and learn from it. The best criticism I ever got, the best advice I ever got about speaking was from a junior high girl in Montgomery, Alabama. I was called back to Montgomery, Alabama, and they were like, we're gonna do a citywide crusade for teenagers. Would you come and speak? So I went there, spoke all week long, and after like the 3rd one, I'm standing there, and this little really fun, blonde, junior high Alabama girl comes bouncing up, and she goes, Ray, I just want to say this. You're really funny. For about 5 minutes, and then she just bounced off. And I was like, I'm gonna excommunicate this kid. And so I went back to the hotel room. I took out what I had put together, and I realized, like a lot of speakers do, they have an introduction to get everybody's attention, and then they bore everybody for the rest of it. And that woke me up. I went, man, I should listen to this kid because it needs to be non-boring the whole time, right? Yes. Except for this service. And so That was the best thing. So sometimes criticism makes you better. However, if it's from mean-spirited people and they're just attacking, well, I went back to the Billy Graham Center years ago and did a spiritual emphasis week for the entire staff of Billy Graham. I was honored to be there. While I'm back there, I'm reading Billy Graham's biography. If any of you are getting criticized or you're in high school, Billy Graham had a great thing. Here's what he said: listening to your critics is like bobbing for apples in a vat of acid. Why would anybody do that? Anybody here need to hear that? From in-laws, outlaws, or any junior high or high school campus, okay? The third thing is this, okay? Number one, believe there are no circumstances God won't use. That will make you stronger. Second is this, quit stressing out because of your critics. That will make you stronger. Number three is this, listen for the call of God and live for something. That will give you purpose, because we get, here's going to go again, we get weak and anemic when we live without purpose, and we get what? Stronger when we live to make great things happen. And that's Paul saying to Timothy the verses I heard, which is this. One night the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Do not be what? Afraid, because it's a limiter. Keep on speaking and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city. So Paul stayed in Corinth for a year and a half, teaching them the word of God. By the way, how important is that? Christine Kane. Remember Christine Kane? Okay, she'll be here speaking on a Thrive conference, and I think preaching here that weekend. Christine Kane has a daughter, and their little daughter was fascinated by flashlights. She would turn off all the lights at home, run around with a flashlight. So one day, she and her husband and her daughter were out driving, and they went, we should stop and get her own flashlight. So they stop at a place, they get her own flashlight, and she hops back in the car. Now it's broad daylight, and she keeps shining the light, and she goes, this doesn't work. She's shining again, like through the window. Nothing lights up because it's daylight. And so she's doing all this kind of stuff. And finally, her daughter blurted this out. She goes, my light doesn't shine. She goes, we need to go find some darkness. Isn't that great? Because the light shines better when it's in darkness, okay? And the minute I heard that, I went, that's it. We have had way too many of God's people say, California's too dark. I'm going to go to somewhere where it's not as dark. And they would leave not realizing when it's dark, turn on the light. Everybody got that? Let me give you a great quote from Darrell Bach. He writes New Testament commentaries. As important as it is that our society operated and raised that what? Lift up humanity. I love this. Nothing lifts up a society more than a community of people filled with people whose hearts are right before God. That's why we exist. That's how the light comes on, and that's why we are here. For kids, teenagers, and everybody else, okay? Number 4, whether we all awake? Number 4, okay, here it is. Make and keep commitments. God strengthens us when we make commitments and we actually keep these commitments, okay? I love this. Now, there's this weird little verse. And here it is. You're like, what? It's the next verse. Before he sailed, Paul had his hair cut off at Centuria because of a vow he had taken. You're like, what the heck does that mean? Well, in Numbers chapter 6, okay, you discover what's going on. And because every first century Christian knew what this is about. And Numbers chapter 6 talks about when a Jewish man wants to make a vow and make a dedication, an all-out dedication for God, he makes a thing called a Nazirite vow, okay? And here's what it is. You let your hair grow long for however long the vow is. Then when the vow is done, you cut off your hair, you take it to the temple in Jerusalem, and you burn it as a sacrifice. That's the vow. Anybody up for doing this? If you look like me, you can't do it, okay? Kevin Thompson is currently doing this. Here's a current picture of Kevin Thompson. Now, it's this strange little vow, but it was in the Bible. Samson did it. Samuel did it. John the Baptist in the New Testament did it. All this Nazirite vow. Now, why is this a deal? because the Bible is filled with stories of people who occasionally, when it called for it, did incredible sacrifice and made incredible commitments. And if you're taking notes, just write this down. There will be seasons in your life that call for you and I to apply these three words: whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Because it's going to go on the screen again. We get weaker and anemic and pathetic when we are half-hearted. And everything gets stronger when we are fully committed. I can prove it. Marriages get weaker when people are half-hearted. Would you agree? Marriage gets stronger when people are fully committed. So you want a stronger marriage? Make a commitment. Teams, sports teams, whatever, they get weaker when people aren't committed to it, and they get way stronger when people are in. Churches get weaker when people are flaky and uncommitted, and they get stronger and have much greater impact when people are fully devoted to Christ, His cause, the Bible, and the church. Raise your hand if you've been at Bayside more than 2 years. Raise your hand if you've been at Bayside. You're good. You wonder, why is this all amazing stuff happen? We have a bunch of people that are fully committed. Things get weaker when this kind of stuff happens. And sometimes you learn that the hard way. I played basketball in high school. Then my first 2 years in college, I played basketball. My first day in college, I realized this is a whole different level. The coach was crazy, and practices were 5 or 6 hours long at the start of the season. And I walk in, and I realize there are 42 people that are basically trying out for this team. And the coach runs this all-out killer practice. My feet were so sore at the end, I took my socks off, they were all bloody. Okay? It was that kind of practice, and I wasn't the only one. I ended up wearing 3 socks for these practices. And the next day we show back up, and we come in like this. I mean, you high school guys playing football or whatever, you know, it's like after the first day of practice, if they kill you, man, you were like walking like this. Why walk into practice? We try to get loose. Another 5 to 6 hours. Our center is standing next to me, a guy named RD. He's sitting next to me. We're running. Anybody know what suicides are? Yeah, they're running. He goes, we're running suicide. He goes and throws up. Comes back, runs another suicide. He goes and throws up. It was nuts. The coach, after that second practice, there were like 35 guys back. The coach said, hey, look, for the record, I'm only keeping 11 guys. He said, I'm not going to cut any of you. I'm going to kill 30 of you. And that was what he did. And I will never forget this. There was only one time that I felt like walking out the door, because guys are walking out of practice. And we're doing this thing on your fingertips forever, and then you're running and then back on. It was like, and I was like, I can't take this anymore. And then I was just getting ready to walk up going, I'm out of here. They're not paying me. And I went, no, I'm not going to quit. It's a bad habit to break. And so I made it through and played. I would never do it again. But here's the deal. To walk effectively with God, live effectively, you've got to go, I will make some commitments in life to the things that matter, and I will be committed whatever it takes. That strengthens you. Make sense? And the last one is this. God strengthens us when we are saturated by the Word of God. I love this. Paul stayed in Corinth teaching them the Word of God. Why? I'm going to put here, it goes on the screen again. We get weak, pathetic, and anemic when we're spiritually malnourished, but we get stronger with a spiritual foundation. And that's true of every age and every stage. Now, I'm going to walk through this and then tell you a story, okay? Number one, you get stronger when you believe that, if you look at your notes, you get stronger when you believe that there are no circumstances God won't use, because that gives you hope. Second is, you get stronger when you quit stressing out because somebody doesn't like you. That gives you focus. Stop focusing on people that don't like you and pleasing people and living for the likes, and focus on God and your calling and your future. Third, you get stronger when you listen to the call of God. So you actually are going, I'm living my life to make some great things happen. 4, you get stronger when you make God-honoring commitments to things that matter, and you are fully devoted, because that gives you commitment. And you get strengthened every week when you are strengthened by the Word of God, because that gives you direction. And what's the definition of a life that's stronger? Hope, focus, purpose, commitment, and direction. That'll strengthen anybody. Now, to back this up, one of these things we talked about is this: live for something that matters. And I tell this story about every 3 years, and but COVID kind of kicked this out. And so, because some of you are going, could God change my life? And it's just little old me. Could God use me? I'm just a plumber. Could God use me? I'm just a police officer. Could God use me? I'm just a teenager. Could God use me? And God specializes in using people to make amazing things happen, and I can prove it, okay? Years ago, I was in Southern California, living in a multiracial community, and then I took a job. I was a senior pastor. I quit being a senior pastor, and I took a job as a youth pastor. I got a promotion, and I moved to Marin County, California. Anybody been to Marin County? Okay, Johnny Shore's from there. The Golden Gate Bridge connects San Francisco and Marin. Robin Williams, the comedian, came from Marin County. He's a typical Marin kid. He said there's an ethnic detector on the Golden Gate Bridge, and any non-white yuppies that try to get into Marin, it flips them into the San Francisco Bay. Robin Williams. Okay, Marin at that point was the wealthiest county in the country, 250,000 people, almost all white. Matter of fact, I moved there and I go, it's so lily white, this is sickening. And then I realized, so it's the wealthiest county. Our church is in the middle of the county, and I become the youth pastor at the wealthiest church in the county that has all these wealthy people and their teenagers in this church. You want to guess what they were like? I walk into high school Sunday school class for the first time, and I look at 18 of the best-looking, brightest Harvard, Princeton-bound, Sierra College-bound students I've ever seen, and I went, but it was the most apathetic bunch of church brats I've ever been around. And I went, so I literally went, I left that. I almost threw up. I went, what have I done? I left that, and I went, I'm going to get these teenagers into missions and service if it kills me. I nearly did. I spent the next 6 months going, we're going to go to Mexico the week before Easter, and we're going to serve. And I was literally like, I did this next week on Sunday school class to 18 people. I said, we're going down to Mexico. We're going to serve the poor. We're going to build houses. We do all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the I give them an hour-long manipulative pitch about going to Mexico, and I'm pretty good at that. And I'm done with it, and I go, all right, who's going with me? And these rich brat kids were like, no. I said, what do you do during Easter? They're like, one girl actually said, oh, we fly to Paris and shop. And she said it like, didn't we all? It's like, oh, I didn't, but of course, Carol did. And it took 6 months. We had these guys going, you don't get it, man. We ski together. It's a tradition. I spent 6 months lying to these kids, okay? Motivating, outright. I'm going, bring your skis. The skiing in Mexico in April is off the hook, okay? Finally, Easter week arrives, and I have 38 high school students bound, gagged, and handcuffed, and on their way to Mexico. We'll all drive down, we get across the border, and the first thing they see are 4 teenage guys laying a friend of theirs down by the side of the road. No arms, no legs, evidently 4 amputations. And that got at him. And people living, multiple people, 10, 12 people, 2 or 3 families living in like cardboard shacks got at him. With this one kid, he knocked on the door, knocked through the door, like fell down, and he's like, hola. And that got at him. And finally, these kids were like, what happened? People with sick kids that couldn't afford like $10 to take them to a doctor. That got at him. And they're going, what's the deal? And I'm going, I don't know. I said to these rich kids, I don't know, maybe they don't have enough money to get medical help in time. And that got at them. But the thing that really got them is this: we get there on a Saturday, we headquarter this huge deal, and then Sunday morning we go to find our church. And here's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to pull up in this church, and this church knows you're coming, and you do a worship service together, have lunch together, build relationships, and then you kind of do projects for their community just to bring the love of Christ to the whole community. And the second, by the way, it took forever to find it because the directions were like turn left at the donkey. Well, the donkey moved. So we finally, after an hour driving around dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, Mexico, we finally find the church. And the second we pull up and see the church, I realize something's terribly wrong because the thing's burned down. There's 4 charred walls. The roof is burned, is gone. All the windows had burned. They were gone. And I got 38 kids looking at me going, way to go, Ray. And I'm thinking the same thing. So I go, wait here, because I hear some noise. Wait here. And I run around the back of this building. I look through this burned out thing, and their church is going on. But this young, tough-looking Mexican pastor is preaching his heart out to 9 very discouraged people sitting on these charred benches. And now I'm going, what do we do? Do we go in? Do we stay out? What's polite here? And I thought, wait a second. We just drove 1,000 miles, man. Let's go to church. So I wave these kids over. We all go in the back door, and all this is the middle of nowhere, Mexico. And all of a sudden, 38 white yuppies from Marin County file in the back of this guy's church. He's so shocked. We're in the back now. We all file in. He's so shocked because he didn't know he was coming. He looks at us, and it gets real tense. And then he goes, "¿Qué pasa?" Which translated means, what are you yuppies doing here? And with this kid that spoke Spanglish, and he said, kind of in half English, half, he basically said this, check this out. We're Christians, we're from the U.S., we're here to help and serve in any way we can. And this pastor got this, and this pastor, you could tell he got it, and he gets real emotional. And I'm thinking he's going to kick us out. Our kids are starting to get scared. They're going, is this okay to be here? Kind of stuff. And this pastor gets real intense, and I thought he's going to throw us out. And then he said these words. He said, a gang burned down our church 6 months ago. And we've been praying for 6 months that God would send help to rebuild our building, but we'd given up any help would ever arrive. But here you are. And it was like everybody was stunned silent for the first time ever with this group. And this kid, not a humble kid, here he blurts this out. He just goes, "Hey, man, we're an answer to prayer." That was their theme all week long. These kids, they're walking around high-fiving each other going, answer to prayer. You know what's interesting? Back home, those teenagers caused prayer. Down there, they were an answer to prayer. We had these gorgeous, beautiful Marin County high school girls, some who'd never even seen dirt. And they came in, truckloads of curling irons, because I forgot to tell them there's no electricity. And 2 days in, they've stashed all that stuff. And all these boyfriend and girlfriend connections happen down there. Why? Because there was a sparkle in the eyes of teenage girls when they are living to make something great happen that is never there when they're just trying to look even better. Make sense? All this stuff happened down there. And we have these useless high school guys. We're in the building the second day. No roof. This dude named Matt goes, "Hey, why don't they have a roof?" I guess it burned down. Why don't they put a new one on? Does it ever rain down here? No, it's a convertible church. He goes, why don't we? I said, they spent everything they had on the first one, man. These people have no money. He goes, why don't we pay for it? They whip off a sombrero, and they made me take pictures to prove to their parents they gave away money. And they're getting out wads like you've never seen. And they literally buy all the materials, and a day later, villagers and all of our kids are nailing a brand new roof on the church, putting in all brand new windows, which didn't do any good because by the end of the week, they're showing the Jesus movie at night. They had too many people were coming. We had to move the entire thing outside. Hundreds of people are coming. They're watching the Jesus movie on the big screen out in front of this church, which is a couple sheets. And these kids get back, and their friends going, they go back to school. They're going, man, cool 10. Where'd you go? Vail? Aspentile? No, where'd you go? Mexico. Can't ski in Mexico. What'd you do? And they go, sit down. Let me tell you, I built a church. I'm an answer to prayer. Okay. Well, what happened is this. When teenagers make a commitment that I will not be afraid. I had a dad a while back come and say, I know you guys at Bayside are going. My daughter wants to go to Mexico. Can you guarantee me it will be safe? What would you say? I said, no. Okay, I said, no, we've never had an unsafe thing happen, but no. Okay, we've been here 30 years. No, but here's what I'd say is, it will be much safer for your kid to actually go and serve in Mexico and learn that they are gifted and learn that God can use them and learn to stretch their faith and learn to stop being afraid of everything and learn that they actually matter and they can make great things happen with their life than it ever will be growing up in Granite Bay and not learning this stuff, okay? And so we go back. The problem is the next year, I'm running out of time. It went from 38 kids to 68 the next year. Problem is we had no church van, no church bus. So I got up in front of our church, just like this, Granite Bay area, Marin County. I get up and I go, we're taking 68 kids to Mexico. We need to borrow your car. That was their exact response. The next week I had a guy named Al get up. and he has a gift of guilt. And I'm standing right next to him. I said, all right, drill him. He looks at our church, and he killed it with one line. This old dude looks up, and he donated his van. He said, did you hear the rumor about our church? The adults in our church are willing to send their kid, but not their car, to Mexico. It was awesome. We had 18 vehicles donated that Sunday. Tim Stanish donated a 4-door Mercedes-Benz, which I drove because I felt responsible. People, as long as I live, I will never forget being in the middle of nowhere, Mexico, with 38 kids who have never served anything, and they're running around, and they are lit up, and they discover they matter, and they discover that they can make things happen, and they discover there's a God who doesn't just love them, but can actually use them, and they came home being heroes because they built homes for people and all of this kind of stuff, and they walk around going, I'm the answer to prayer, because the second you serve, the second you stop living for yourself, and you start living to make great things happen, you wake up and discover you have become the answer to somebody else's prayer. Why would you want to live any other way? And the sermon is over. Intro to Bayside is right there, starts in 1 minute. Have a great day. I am totally out of time. Thanks for listening. Love you guys.
All right, guys, thanks so much for watching our Bayside online service. We're so glad that you're actually part of our church, which you are, even though you're watching from all over the world, and we have people literally watching from all over the world. You are part of our family, and we want to get to know you. So please make sure you get in touch with us. Let us know your story. We'd love to hear you and serve you in any way we can. Also, part of what drives the way we connect as a church globally is giving. And so if you're part of our family, we would love you to start giving to our church. Those resources, we steward them to reach people all over the world. And we hear amazing stories about what Jesus is doing with your resources. So if you already give, thank you. If not, you can start giving. We would love that. And then finally, we have all kinds of stuff we do. We have a podcast network. We have like 10 podcasts that address a whole bunch of different things in your life. So if you're a podcaster, join us in the Thrive Podcast Network. We'd love to serve you. We've got a ton of stuff there. We just want to make sure that you feel part of our family. So we love you. Thank you so much for being part of this family, and we will see you next week.